So I'm Arthur Shaka Senghor, and I've written so far 7 books, 4 novels, poetry book, essay book, and my memoir, which is due soon. But Live in Peace is one of the books that I felt like was one of my most important books at the time I published it, because I think that it speaks to what's really going on with the young men and young women in our community and gives them an opportunity to be really interactive. It's the type of book where you can read a chapter and then do some of the exercise. You'll find that it's really enlightening. And one of the things that I've been finding lately with Live in Peace is that as much as I wrote this for young people, that it's really resonating with a lot of adults as well, because it touches on experiences that they've never had an opportunity to address in their teenage years. So it's definitely the type of read that's, you can use as a parent and interact with your child, and to kind of really be able to deal with some of those core issues that they may be going through and that you may have gone through as well. My first 2 novels are detective mysteries that take place in the city of Detroit. I always wanted to really write from a perspective of, problem solving and in an urban setting, but still being very genuine about street culture, street life, but in a way that really raises awareness and consciousness about what we're doing. So you can find Crack Volume 1 and Volume 2 at dropagem.publishing.com. That's DROPAGEM publishing.com. And you can find Live in Peace at lipeace.com. That's lipeace.com. And coming soon, you'll be able to find my memoir, Right My Wrongs, at shakasengor.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Shaka Senghor. You can follow me on Facebook at Shaka Senghor. And just connect with me. You can call me 313-720-5546. If you're interested in the mentoring program being brought to your school, being brought to your community, we can figure out how to make that work. We also have a T-shirt that goes with the Live in Peace book. And the idea behind the T-shirt was we want to be able to replace some of these Rest in Peace T-shirts and really counter that culture of death that's prevalent in our community, and really give young people something to aspire toward, which is living in peace, which takes work, activeness, being actively engaged in the process of living. Whereas when you think about rest in peace, rest means that you're inactive, you're no longer existence, you're no longer accomplishing anything. And so we want to counter that culture and really kind of raise awareness and create that paradigm shift so that young brothers and sisters will be excited about living in peace and really understand that it takes courage and compassion, empathy, and just a genuine spirit to thrive in order to live in peace. The way I view misguided is when, young people receive poor or misinformation that, sets them up for failure. And when you look at, growing up in a city like Detroit, where there's a lot of single parent households, the young brothers are getting raised by people outside of their parents, people outside on the streets, that's often where they get a lot of their influence from. And what tends to happen is that the older guys, they feed poor information or misinformation to young people, and they end up misguiding them and sending them down the wrong path and glorifying things that are unhealthy for them, glorifying the violence, the drug selling, the misogyny and things like that. And even when you look in our music culture, that's a form of guidance, because that's what young people listen to. And when you have these, rappers and MCs who aren't giving any real context to the lyrics that they're spitting, then it sets young people up for failure to think that these things are really attainable, or that these rappers are doing some of the things they're talking about when they're not. But then the young person ends up trying to follow what they're hearing and what they're seeing. And so in those different ways, a lot of the young men and our women in our community have really been led down the wrong path. In my book, I talk about reclaiming the innocence of childhood, because what I realized is that when I was growing up and I ended up in the streets, that I was exposed to a very unhealthy adult culture at a very young age. And it stripped me of the innocence of youth who wanted to, it's certain things that youth shouldn't be exposed to, and that you have to grow into. You have to grow into healthy relationships. You have to grow into healthy interactions. And when you're exposed to unhealthy cultures as a child, it strips you of your innocence. It strips you of, being empathetic, being compassionate. It makes you very cynical. And I think that's one of the worst things. Like when I was young, I started growing very distrustful of people who hadn't even done anything wrong yet. But because of the things that had been done wrong to me by adults, it was easy for me to be cynical. And so when I think about claiming my innocence, it's more about like refreshing my thinking as a man and really going back to the original, way I was thinking as a child. Growing up with this hopefulness and this optimism and the ability to dream, to pursue my dreams, to really see the best in people and to look for the best in people and to cultivate those type of relationships and friendships when I meet people. And I think that's important. I think that when you look at, men and women who have gone through some difficult times, if you can get them to really reflect back to the innocence of childhood, to when they just was like, you know what, all I want to do is ride my bike and let the wind blow through my hair, go outside and fly a kite and enjoy nature and things like that. I think it kind of reverses some of the damage of the experiences that they've had, and it allows you to live again with a sense of youthful exuberance. Yeah, it's a funny thing that happened when I was released from prison after serving 19 years. Is I realized that I had what's called arrested development, and even though I was 38 years old at the time, there were parts of me that were still 19. And parts of me was still trying to reclaim, in terms of, just things I was doing, hanging out, partying, style of dressing, music I listened to. And I realized that was one of the ways, because, you can go back and you can try to reclaim your youth in some very unhealthy ways. And a lot of times you see that, you see guys just, in their mid-30s and 40s trying to date teenagers or trying to hang out at the, young teenage club. You get older women who they got this term for them now called cougars, who may be dating guys that's far younger than them and not really mature, enough. And so it's some unhealthy ways you can kind of go back, and it's very dysfunctional, But I think that's part of the process as well, not the dating, the super young people. I just think that's a different issue. But in terms of just really going back and living, they say you're only as old as you feel. And the thing is, you have to find balance between youthful exuberance and being a responsible and accountable adult. And that's where it really comes from. It's like you have to figure out what that balance is, what that balance looks like. And so I've been able to find it. I've been able to just really, think about things that I missed, like the poetry scene. When that first really caught fire, I was incarcerated. So I had no opportunity to be exposed to that. And so now I can go back and appreciate it. One, I get excited like a young teenager, but then now I'm mature enough to really appreciate the art form and appreciate the literary impact that it has on the community and people. So, yeah. Yeah. I address the issue of teenage drug addiction based on my own experiences of experimenting with, started off experimenting with, with weed, and then it was, alcohol, and then I tried lace joints, which was, laced with crack cocaine. And the thing about addiction is we have these very divisive ways of looking at addiction. We look at heroin addiction, we look at crack, we look at those things as so negative and like you are incapable of being in control. But you get a lot of young people who are addicted to weed, to where they can't function. They can't, complete tasks in school, so they end up dropping out. They're not responsible when it comes to work, so they remain unemployed. It disrupts their mental development, which is really, we don't take that into consideration when it comes to our community. And I know several instances where some of these drugs have led to mental disorders. Drugs, you're talking about like E-pills and stuff that's really changing the chemical balance of brains that's still growing and evolving. And that's the danger. That's the danger of any addiction, whether it's alcohol, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's weed or either the harder drugs. But it's very real. When you can't function, you can't be accountable. You don't want to be responsible. You want to sit on the couch all day and depend on somebody else to provide for your habits. Then that's a serious addiction, and that's something that we have to start addressing. We have to stop making it hot just because a rapper, talk about how much kush they blow. We have to stop thinking that's fashionable. Because at the end of the day, they have disposable income. You know what I'm saying? And they have a type of employment that's part of that culture. But when you living in your mama's basement and you live in, you know what I'm saying, and you're not paying rent, you're not paying bills, but you have these habits that, you know, aren't allowing you to go to school, aren't allowing you to perform effectively a working, you know, young man or young woman, then that's something that really should be addressed. And then there's other areas of it that lead to addiction, leads to very spontaneous actions. You know, we got high levels of promiscuity. You know, if you look at, you know, young teenage men and women who are very promiscuous, usually it's because part of it is, well, sometimes is other reasons why they get into that pattern, but the alcohol and the weed smoking makes it easier for them to really continue to embrace that pattern, and that's dangerous. I mean, it's, you can't be 14 years old, 15 years old, drinking alcohol and then smoking these high strains of weed and then making rational decisions. Like, it's just not realistic. You know, you're going to have sex without condoms, and you're going to, you know, contract sexually transmitted disease and get people pregnant that you can't take care of. And so it hinders their ability to be responsible and accountable. And we have to address that in our community. Like, we got to stop making it like that's okay just because, oh, it's just weed. No, it's not just weed. It's a drug that's impairing the mental development of your child. And, you know, it's one thing when you're an adult, you can do what you want to. Your brain is fully grown. But when you have children that you're responsible to, then we have to stop encouraging that behavior. We have to stop, you know, smoking weed with our kids because they're going to do it anyway in the streets, and trying to justify certain behavior. Stop buying liquor for kids outside the store just because they're 17 and you did it when you were 17. Like, you know, those are things that we have to really address in our community.